My world's on fire. How about yours? That's the way I like it, and I'll never get bored. Hey everyone, my name's Christian Verstappen, and I have a lot to say about many things. I want to talk about dealing with anxiety and stress about the current state of the world, and more specifically about things that aren't in your control. In my last video, I discussed very specifically some of the ways that the world is actually getting better, and how, while it's easy to look back on the past and on times that might have been simpler to us, even in our own childhood, or times that have been kind of glorified because of how far removed from current history they are, there were a lot of problems with the times back then, and there are a lot of ways that things are getting better by a ton of metrics today. But there are also ways that it's getting worse. And what do we do about those ways? Well, first let's address some of them. The most obvious, most prevalent one that is affecting everybody in the world right now is the current drastic climate changes that we're seeing, and the fact that we're, quite frankly, really headed toward a climate crisis. It's predicted that in the next 50 to 100 years, and that's being generous, mind you, that we'll start seeing climate refugees coming from really south of the equator in general. People from, Africa and places like that are often going to escape to Europe, and places like South and Central America are going to be escaping to, well, the United States and Canada. And I want to be perfectly clear. If that does happen, because I believe it still can be changed, but we're really running out of time here. But if it does happen, I do firmly believe that countries that have the ability to bring in people should absolutely do that, and not just leave them to fend for themselves or something because they were born south of the equator. It's not their fault. Now, I may discuss climate change more specifically at some point in the future. I don't know. It's not really something I kind of want to delve into specifically, but definitely a point in this kind of broader topic here, which is, again, with something like climate change, how do we go about addressing it? Rather, on an individual level, how do we handle it mentally? Because the reality is the world around us, whether it directly affects us right in the moment, hearing about it does affect us. Learning about it, hearing about the people in Australia, the UK, California, etc., that are having forest fires and people dying of heat stroke and different things in the UK, and even America in some places like Arizona and stuff like that. Those are aspects of empathy that propel us to care about our fellow man, care about people and the world around us. In a way, it's good that we feel so bad. It's no secret either that there are definitely issues we're dealing with outside of that. If you live in America or adjacent to America as well, or really kind of can't escape hearing about it anyway, we have the situation with human rights being overturned, starting with Roe v. Wade, and there's a large fear that I think is very justifiable as far as where things can go from here, especially when we have the people that have actually, talked about and really kind of supported this mentality that, oh, well, everything needs to be looked at, including the right to contraception and gay marriage and so on and so forth. It's pretty bad. Again, I don't think it's hopeless, but it is pretty bad. And finally, a very big concern that's been going on for months. Whether you're in the country of Ukraine or not, you've no doubt heard about and are familiar with the war happening there, where the superpower of Russia is completely invading Ukraine, completely unfounded, not really within their rights at all. They'll tell their people that it's about reclaiming Russian heritage and things like that. And what you find is that we've learned from experience, we've learned from history, we as human beings, thankfully, that appeasement doesn't work, and things like this need to be fought against before they can get worse. So many countries, many allies are working with Ukraine, of course, to fight back the Russians and make the situation better. It's funny, talking about fighting the Russians sounds like we're back in the Cold War, but what are you going to do? Another big thing going on in the United States specifically is the inflation that we're dealing with. We're dealing with really high gas prices. We're dealing with basically everything just being more expensive. I'm no stranger to this. Rent is constantly being increased on people with no end in sight. There are just many, many issues occurring across the board that is making it nearly impossible for people to live in this country, like financially sustaining themselves. They're all things that are happening in the world that you did not directly cause. These aren't things that you are in the position you are of your own fault. These aren't things like you're obese and you want to lose weight. These aren't things like you're in debt and you need to get out of debt. You could be, right? Those things could still be there as well, and they obviously wouldn't help the current situation. But these are things that are ultimately out of your control. So how do you deal with them? There are things that you can do. There are organizations you can support financially and otherwise. There are things and policy positions you can do to do things like try to protect human rights, protect yourself and your partner or potential partners from unwanted pregnancy, have a plan in place if that kind of thing occurs. There are things you can do in these kind of situations. But what about the bigger ones? With inflation, there are things that you can do to kind of, really kind of budget your money. You can try to pick up another job if you need to. None of these are perfect solutions, and this is far from a pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, because I completely don't advocate for that. But there are steps that you can take to make the situation better, and that's an important thing. Because as I said, most of this is about mental health, especially when we look at the bigger issues like climate change and the war in Ukraine. What can you individually do about those things? I'm gonna be honest, nothing. But that doesn't mean you can't do anything. And that especially doesn't mean that you personally can't take care of the most important thing, which is your mental health. For a long time, I kind of prided myself, and a lot of people I feel like do, in this idea that, I don't pay attention to the news, I don't pay attention to politics, all that does is make you worry and make you stress and make you feel bad about things, etc., etc. And to an extent, that's true. While I do believe it is important and good to be informed, especially when knowing about positions and platforms you're voting for and things like that, the way that news cycles and anything, any source where you can get any kind of news from, the way that it is laid out is to be in the most eye-catching, emotionally reactive way that it can be. Why? Because it gets people to click, it gets people to watch, it gets people to do all of those things, it gets people to listen, it gets people to read, so on and so forth. There isn't anything you can do about these drastic of situations, broadly speaking. But you can do things to take care of your own mental health. And that is the most important thing here. What can you do? Functionally, not a whole lot. But there are ways that our brain works, ways that it's evolved into doing things such as having stress kind of pumped into the brain as a way to kind of teach itself, hey, get away from the animal that's trying to eat you. Things like that, right? But when that stress is constantly happening, and it's very easy for this to occur by keeping up with news and politics and all of those different things, there are ways to limit it. The most important things that you can do are to take a step back, especially from the most important things that you can do are to take a step back, especially for the things that are out of your control personally. And what you want to do is start applying this concept that was mind-blowing to me when I heard it, which is insufficient change. Do things that only slightly nudge you in the direction that you want to go. That's not saying if you start doing something like recycling, for example, you want to take small steps to doing things that make you feel like you're doing something, because you are, to an extent. You're not going to change the world all by yourself, but you can take steps to make it better for yourself and others. When I started dieting and working out to get into better shape, get a better appearance of myself, and ultimately feel better about myself, I started with things that were seemingly insufficient change. But little by little, they built up. I started eating higher protein, lower carbs. I started working out. And while you don't see the results right away, they do come with repetition and continuous expansion and growth, building upon what you started from. And you can do that with anything. You can do that, even if it's something as simple as, like, if you're doom scrolling online all the time, you're doom scrolling through Twitter or anything else like that, and you take a step back, even just for like 5 to 10 minutes, the difference from all day to all day minus 5 to 10 minutes is huge. And you can start doing that more and more. Before you know it, you're taking 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, to the point where you're only really kind of paying attention to this stuff when you need to. And the reality is, for most people, if an issue's big enough that you need to know about it, you're gonna know about it. While I do believe it's important to stay informed and to know what's going on in the world, you don't need to fixate all of your time and energy on those specific things. Yeah, the world is on fire. But you are not going to be able to put the fire out with your tears. You're not going to be able to put the fire out or add another day of your life, or another day, minute, second even, for how long we have to deal with such issues, by worrying about it. One of the most important things as far as taking care of yourself and your mental health goes is controlling what you can, changing what you don't like either about yourself or the world around you, primarily yourself, and accepting what you can't. We are creatures of habit. We are also creatures of adaptability. We adapt to our surroundings. We always have. It's how humans have survived and evolved for millions and billions of years. And it's how we'll continue doing it. Many people throughout history thought that they were living in the end times. They thought they were living at the end of the world and nothing was going to happen after that. This is it. This is the end. How many times were they right? There are going to be people looking back on us decades, centuries, millennia from now, and saying, wow, they really messed things up. But they might get to look back at us and say, but you know what? They really pulled together and fixed the mess that they created. If they can do that, if we, human beings, can do that, there's nothing we can't do. As always, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like, and if not, I hope you find something to do like. Please be kind and considerate to each other in the comments. I know this can be touchy for some people, so just, be aware of that. But until then, later, guys. Peace and love.